Apparently, if young men want to save the West, you're now woke right. Ooh. Now, look, back when this all kicked off in October, I wrote a piece for The Critic where I said, without a clear definition, woke right begins to look like an attempt by yesterday's left to tone police, gatekeep, and redefine the right. That way, heterodox liberals position themselves as the sensible centre between two extremes and maintain their positions of intellectual credibility no matter how far the Overton window shifts. Antagonism will arise from left behind liberals seeking to rearrange the furniture on their new political side without examining how their first principles rendered them vulnerable to woke subversion in the first place. So, woke right, I believe, was always a cudgel with which to beat actual social conservatives and Christians and post-liberals on the right, because it has become a refugee camp for the left me liberals who do not want to examine, because it is too painful, how liberalism was so vulnerable to woke subversion that it ended up in the last stage of the woke revolution, of which they were temporarily embarrassed. And instead, they would just rather rewind to the stage of revolution they were comfortable with, and they find it icky that they're surrounded by conservatives who want to undo the entire liberal project. And bear that in mind when we go through the following article by Axios. So Axios has said, inside MAGA's fight for Western civilization. Zoom in. For MAGA loyalists taking this long view, preserving Western civilization is the new Make America Great Again. They proclaim America as a Judeo-Christian country that's the successor to the great European civilizations of Greece, Rome, and the United Kingdom. They see a modern Western civilization as one that prizes freedom, the rule of law as they interpret it, meritocracy, and the nuclear family. Yes, that's all very particular to the countries that you name. Now, Western civilization is a concept that was popularized along with Judeo-Christian in the aftermath of the Second World War, where for, yes, purposes of ideological continuity, but being value neutral here, for matters of geopolitical expediency, Israel and the Jewish people, after the horrors of the Holocaust, were trying to engage in a PR exercise to closer tie themselves to the Christian West. The West being the bloc that was west of the Eastern Bloc, under the Iron Curtain, under the domain of what Dwight Eisenhower called the godless communism of the Soviet Union. And I think that's a pretty fair description. And Judeo-Christianity shares a origin point with the Old and New Testament, even if the New Testament threw out all of the laws of the Torah and only kept the stories of the Tanakh. And of course, there are parts in the Talmud where certain rabbis disagree with the presence of Jesus and condemn him to boiling in a lake of excrement forever, but not all Jews abide by that, so we can't judge them collectively. Of course, after the Nazi atrocities and the precarious fate of the newly established State of Israel, there were lots of people who were interested in forging stronger ideological ties between Christians and Jews. One of the best examples of this actually is Will Herberg. He wrote a 1955 book, Protestant, Catholic, and Jew. I think it's in a box somewhere because I've just moved, but it's not on the shelf behind me. He coined the phrase cut flower culture that you've probably heard used by the likes of Jordan Peterson, Dennis Prager, and Ayaan Hirsi Ali. That the concept is that, much like the city-states of old that would take soil from the old state and plant it in the new state, or Constantinople, which bragged about having a relic of Troy in the center of its city, showing it had continuity from old Rome and old Greece in the new Christian empire. If you take a seed from a withering flower and plant it, you can regenerate a lost culture, but only if it's connected to its roots. And the argument was that America is a flourishing flower, it's peaceful, it's prosperous, it's wealthy, especially after the Marshall Plan extrapolated so much money from the declining British Empire and made America the global hegemon. And it's also the city on a hill, as Governor John Winthrop of the Plymouth Rock founders said it would be. It would be the new Jerusalem. But in order for it to flourish, that flower needs to be connected to the roots of Old Jerusalem, which, of course, with the establishment of Israel, had just come under the domain of a Jewish government again, and had sought to keep the holy sites of Christianity better preserved than if they were under the domain of an illiberal Islamic empire. So this settlement, this sort of engendering of stronger ties, was a post-war project, and it came to its apotheosis in the aftermath of the Cold War, when the evil empire had been defeated, but then when the rise of the Mujahideen and other Muslim militias meant that the West was now defined as the Judeo-Christian liberal bloc, from the heritage of Roman law, from the philosophies of Athens, from the fighting spirit of Sparta, and from the Mosaic law in Jerusalem and the birth of the Saviour in Bethlehem, versus the Islamic world and their post-communist and liberal allies in the likes of China and now Russia, the sort of BRICS nations. The West came to define that, and that's why Israel is now lumped in with the West despite its geographic proximity. Again, I'm just giving a sort of value-neutral analysis of this. This is the kind of argument that you'll find in Ben Shapiro's The Right Side of History, that the West is summed up by Rome, Athens, and Jerusalem. And so, for Axios to act like this is just a new revelation to them, or to stumble upon this as a strange concept, is basically playing hatchling. They're acting like they were born yesterday, they just woke up, and that they've just understood with unalloyed horror the fact that MAGA seeks to conserve what is particular about their own civilization. I would get even more particular than the phrase the West. That's why I don't really use it very often, because it only defines our countries and our cultures in opposition to the things that are existential threats to them. It's the Schmittian idea that your political friends are found by external existential threats bringing you together. Instead, what national conservatives would like to do, which is the strong strain of the philosophy that runs through MAGA, thanks to J.D. Vance being a student of René Girard and Rod Dreher and Patrick Deneen, what they seek to do is preserve everything particular to their country. The reason that you say American culture or British culture is because those cultures are the possessions of the people that formulated them in a place and time. This is what J.D. Vance meant by America is not a nation of ideas. It is a nation occupied by a people who had those ideas, which is why they belong to them in the first place. And this is why he has had his family buried in a cemetery in Kentucky for generations, and that's where he'll be laid to rest. They are people in a particular place over time who practice a set of beliefs, and those beliefs become a culture which belongs to them. Contrast that with liberal universalism of both, yes, the woke progressive left, but also the left behind liberals, who are now using the phrase woke right, who believe that you can make laws for everyone because there is an anthropology of universal human sameness. Everyone is just a fungible, disposable consumer unit, pried apart by the happenstance of geography, because Pangea broke up originally, but we were all living in something akin to a secular Garden of Eden. We were all living in a state of freedom and equality, and so if you enter the Rawlsian veil of ignorance and strip yourself of all cultural prejudices, through a thought exercise, you can make laws and a cultural condition that is suitable for all people in all times and all places. And therefore, anything that smells like particularism or national conservatism is anathema to them. And this drive in national conservatism is also being driven by a surge in Christianity among young men, something Axios is also very upset by. And Christianity, despite accusations from Nietzscheans who have good critiques of socialism, but I think incorrect critiques of Christianity, that it is a universalizing doctrine of weakness. Remember, the final verse in the Gospel of Matthew was, "Go forth and be a minister to all nations." It was not, try to reconstruct the Tower of Babel again, make one universal homogenizing system, but good this time. So Christianity is actually very respective of people's cultural particularities, which exists in times and places, which is why evangelization needs to be ergonomic to people's cultural sensibilities. It's not just a cookie-cutter imprint ideology that impresses itself upon a people, and then all of the leftover dough that falls outside the imprint is to be discarded. Their culture is just to be thrown away, and they're to conform to the system. That's what liberalism does, based on the blank slate anthropology that we're all the same underneath, and that differences in economic outcomes, in education, in culture, in preferences are all entirely arbitrary. And so you can take a person from this part of the world, drop them in a liberal society, and they'll slot seamlessly in like so many cogs, because we are all latently equal deep down and underneath. And this brings us to the phrase woke right, because what the woke right is, as a tool, is a stick with which the establishment mainstream can pick up on behalf of uncomfortable liberals to beat their socially conservative, nationally conservative, and strongly Christian compadres, because they don't feel comfortable sharing the right with them. The right was their refugee camp, and they now want it to be their new home, in which they can rearrange the furniture at the expense of the homeowners. What the woke right actually is as a definition, they like to play a bit Mott and Bailey. They like to act like it's just anonymous anti-Semitic neo-Nazis on Twitter. This is what Jordan Peterson and James Lindsay were discussing in their recent podcast, where they were listing off all the characteristics of the satanic woke right.
Maybe we could lay out some of the behavioral markers so that, because we might as well make this concrete. I can tell you what I've observed about the behavior of psychopathic parasites online. Okay.
Sure.
Maybe if you have 5 of these, you're one of them. You know what I mean?
That's
so
often
any one alone isn't enough.
Right. Diagnostic criteria.
So in the comment sections, for example, anonymity is a marker.
Mm-hmm.
Use of a transgressive cover name, often satanic, often. So, and it's tongue in cheek, but no, it's not.
Yeah.
Derisive language, right? So that would be language indicative of contempt.
Yeah.
Contempt's a really toxic emotion, contempt and disgust. Hitler used disgust language to characterize the Jews, not fear language.
That's right.
And you destroy things you're disgusted by.
That's right.
You stay away from things you're afraid of.
It says in Mein Kampf.
Absolutely. They use derisive and contemptuous, what do you call those? LOL is a good example.
Dismissive kind of.
Acronyms.
Yeah, acronyms. Okay.
Now, there's lulz culture online.
Yes,
right?
of course.
I do it for the lulz. That's a hallmark of sadism. Now, those people who do those things, so those are 4 or 5 things: anonymity, pathological nom de plume, derisive language, and then the use of these contemptuous and cool acronyms. Belittling, they use the word dude. That's a real good marker.
Yeah.
Or they'll use a derisive nickname to kind of equalize the playing field.
Yeah. I'm Jimmy a lot.
You're Jimmy.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Diminutive. They'll use a diminutive.
Jimmy Concepts instead of Conceptual James.
Right.
That started on the left, and now the right uses it.
Right. Yeah. So those are markers. What else have I seen? An insane rise in explicit anti-Semitism. And that's been going on for about 5 years, and it's worse all the time.
And Nazi apology.
Yeah, well, that's
which isn't just the apology
now.
too.
Yeah.
It's the transgression. It's the post the meme, sometimes meant to be funny, so you have plausible deniability, or the other social functions of humor come into play. But they'll post the meme of Hitler. Why? Because you're not supposed to.
Yeah, right. By the costless social media platforms. Do you have any sense? So we're working out ways to identify people.
Swarm behavior, by the way, is another one.
Another marker. So you'll get one of these derisive replies, and within minutes it'll get 600 likes on it. You don't know how that happened. From an account with 30 followers, and your reply somehow gets 600 likes in a minute or 2 minutes, and then everybody piles like
on.
A biblical plague of locusts.
And then they jump in on you and say you got ratioed. Of course, a lot of it's bots that people bought. Yeah. But what they do is they say, my comment was more popular than your comment, therefore you're not very interesting and we're very interesting, so we're ascendant. And by the way, that's psychologically really impactful if you don't know what's going on.
Yes, definitely.
You feel like the crowd, they tell me this all the time, we're all laughing at you. We're all laughing at you. We're all laughing at you.
Yeah, right.
It's very sophisticated psychological torment.
They used phrases like, lols and saying dude and being dismissive and using anonymous accounts, and then just threw in and they're anti-Semitic, as if those are necessarily connected. They do have some overlap, of course. Let's not pretend that QAnon doesn't exist, and I think, as just John Doyle, that's largely driven by government bad faith actors trying to discredit immigration restrictionists among the national conservative right. It's way easier to do it with anonymous accounts. If they do it already with in-person protests and they do undercover stings to infiltrate groups on the political fringes, how much easier is it to do with an anonymous account on Twitter and on Discord? We already know that the 77th Brigade uses bot farms in the UK to shape public opinion during COVID, so this is absolutely a psyop. But by necessarily connecting these odious and contentious views with the practices of being anonymous online and shitposting, that creates the pretext for censorship. And so, woke right, as we can see, is a cudgel picked up by the mainstream to beat conservatives over the head by liberals and atheists who feel icky about being in coalition with them. It's the new clearing out of the fusionism of the Cold War, which William F. Buckley Jr. and his liberal counterpart Frank Meyer did to the likes of Pat Buchanan, which is why the phrase Buchanan right has been started. Now, I'd like to make a clarification here. I'm not a follower of Pat Buchanan. I don't know a lot of his work. I know Tucker Carlson is a fan, for example, and I think I disagree with Carlson and Buchanan, therefore, interpretations on Churchill. I think, actually, that Roosevelt and Stalin were the main drivers of why Europe was dilapidated after the Second World War, and that if Churchill, were he transported through time now to see what the likes of the UN Refugee Convention, the European Convention on Human Rights has done for migration, he would be so opposed that he would be regarded as far-right or woke-right. There you go. So I don't think that this is a fair characterization to lump the likes of Tucker Carlson or myself, as James Lindsay has done, or Carl Benjamin, or Yoram Hazony, who himself is an observant Jew, in with anonymous, possibly government actor neo-Nazis on Twitter. But the conflation is the point, because what it's meant to do is it's meant to clear out the right of anyone who isn't a liberal. And James Lindsay admitted this by saying that, first of all, the woke right or Buchanan right just want to create family-friendly tyranny. So anything that smells like a normative judgment, anything that's particular to a culture, anything that is Christianity which is judgmental of unwholesome lifestyles and sexual appetites, like an open marriage that James Lindsay might therefore take personally, that is to be ostracized because it's not aiming at freedom and equality, which is the liberal dream. James Lindsay says that, Satan himself is woke.
If I might just interject, if he's the morning star, what do you do in the morning after the morning star rises? You wake up.
Right.
Woke.
Right.
I know that clip is hilarious. What he's driving at is that the likes of Saul Alinsky and Mikhail Buchanan praised Satan in their works, and they were demented communists and revolutionaries. So there is some connected tissue there. It just sounds like he's playing free association and like slam poetry with his words. It was just a bit silly. But the problem is the connective tissue between wokeness, liberalism, and communism, which allowed wokeness to prey on liberalism uniquely, but not on national conservatism, is because the doctrine of liberalism is do as thou wilt. It is for the advancements in scientific materialism to meet the needs of people's appetites, to reduce suffering, to ensure that the rising tide of material equality lifts all ships. And that is the doctrine of lower P progress that liberals cling to. This is the doctrine that James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose cling to in their book Cynical Theories. They denounce critical theories for playing divide and conquer among the liberal individualist society. And they praise all of the previous stages of liberal individualist revolution, like gay rights and civil rights, and they want to keep that in place, even though it led ineluctably to the woke revolution. And their main fear is that it's going to be so successful at divide and conquering that it's going to lead to the rise of a white nationalist far right. So that is always the spectre living large in their minds. So this is why woke right is now the cudgel to beat down people that they see as illiberal and also white nationalists, because they see the two as innately linked. And what national conservatives, religious conservatives, and crazy white nationalists have in common is they think that values are particular to peoples. Now, they have very different prescriptions. White nationalists are a lot more violent a lot of the time, if we're talking about people like Anders Breivik, for example, if we're talking about actually properly defined white nationalists, right? Not just the smear that everyone throws out and labels people that want to defend their culture. Whereas national conservatives are more interested in the formation of a state in the direction of the common good. But anything that smells like exclusivity, anything that smells like normative ethical judgment, is radioactive to universalist liberals, because they think you can make laws for all people in all places and all times. And this philosophical contradiction has opened up like a fissure in the anti-woke coalition, and this is why the phrase woke right is being used to clean house by the liberals who have found themselves in this camp. And there is an admission that this is just blatant mean girl reputation destruction, you can't sit with us at our lunch table tactics, by Lindsay, because he responded to a tweet by Dr. Taylor Marshall, who was praising the new Pope Leo's anti-communism. And Lindsay said, well, you don't believe in this anti-communism, because if you did, I would be your leader, actually. I would be prom queen if you actually believed in my liberal anti-communist values. Instead, you're basically one step away from fascists and you're basically communists yourselves. So the term woke right is used by people who believe in universalist liberalism, who believe in this anachronistic anthropology of the blank slate, to attack people who want to defend their portion of Western civilization, but believe that the values of that portion are particular to that portion. They want to defend Christianity that is particular to America and Britain. They want to defend British culture, American culture, German culture. Ironically, they want what Israel themselves have, which is a thriving religion, positive birth rates, positive GDP, a strong military, a strong consciousness of themselves as a people and a civilization. They just want that for themselves, which I think is kind of like the Western argument saying that, you know, the Christian West after the Second World War should support Israel being folded back on itself. And I think there's a strong argument to have there. So lumping in Western civilization chauvinists and national conservatives with anonymous online neo-Nazis is just poisoning the well, and it's a blatant attempt at reputation destruction by liberals who feel uncomfortable that you can't just rewind the revolution to the non-judgmental liberal stage that pre-existed critical race theory and gender ideology. Instead, what you're going to see is a muscular reassertion of national identity and Christianity. And, okay, if liberals' consciences start gnawing at them because of lifestyle habits that they feel bad about being judged for, sorry, me saving my civilization makes a lot more sense and matters a lot more than you feeling better about yourself. So the term woke right is a total nonsense and should be consigned to the philosophical dustbin where it belongs.